Hi guys, Olive here. Today I'm here to do part 1 of my spring 2017 book haul. In this section of the book haul, I'd like to talk to you about all the nonfiction that I've picked up recently. I'm going to start out with the nonfiction that I've acquired that does not deal with Russia, which is the minority of this haul, and then move into all the books that relate to Russia. The first book I'd like to show you is Nurture Shock: New Thinking About Children by Poe Bronson and Ashley Merriman. This was one of my favorite reads of 2015. I will link that favorites video down in the description box below in case you missed that back in the day. But basically this is a book on parenting. Observations on parenting, parenting tips. All the information that is in this book is based off of scientific studies that different scientists have done regarding child psychology and behavior. Even though I do not have any children of my own, I still found it absolutely fascinating. I find myself thinking about it all the time, so I am really happy I have my own copy of it now. The next book in this haul is one that I was kindly sent by W.W. Norton, and that is The Outrun by Amy Liptrot. This is Amy Liptrot's memoir about her childhood spent in northern Scotland, how her childhood was largely shaped by her father's mental illness, and how her later life was characterized by her dealings with alcoholism. 10 years after she has left, she returns to her childhood hometown to try to come to terms with things in her childhood and heal. Although I am not typically the biggest reader of memoir, this is one that sounds extremely interesting to me. And the back says that it is for readers of H is for Hawk, which was one of my favorite books of this past year. Definitely excited to pick this one up soon. And the last non-Russia nonfiction book that I picked up is Lives Like Loaded Guns: Emily Dickinson and Her Family's Feuds by Linda Gordon. This book not only talks about Emily Dickinson's life, she was an infamous hermit, but also talks about her brother's love affair with a young Amherst faculty wife. Before seeing this book at a used bookstore, I had never heard about that controversy, and now I am absolutely dying to know more about it. Now on to all the nonfiction that deals with Russia. I have quite a few that I've picked up myself, and then a lot that I have received from Steve over at Steve Donahue. As always, thank you, Steve. But I will first show off the ones that I have picked up on my own accord and one that a publisher sent me. First and foremost, I was recently at a library book sale, and I found these 3 books: Russian Level 2, 3, and 4. These are books on language learning. I will definitely be using these. They did not have level 1, which actually works out well since I believe I am above a level 1 speaker of Russian. Another book I found at that exact same library book sale is Russia 1917, The Unpublished Revolution. This is a collection of information and images from 1917 from Russia's revolutions, plural. It's broken down by month, so in each month you will see different images of what was happening in Russia at the time. So this is an image from October, and it tells you different things that were happening and shows you images of what was happening in Russia during that month of 1917. I am highly considering handing over my entire October reading month to reading on the Russian Revolution, and this would definitely be a part of that. One book that I bought for myself that I've been wanting for a really long time is Restless Empire: A Historical Atlas of Russia. This book contains visual representations of how Russia has changed geographically speaking over the years. So for example, this whole section talks about Nicholas I and the Crimean War. This one is obviously all about the Russian Civil War. Not only are the images beautiful, but I think they're extremely useful because since Russia is such a huge country, it's hard to sometimes picture what different historical occurrences would have meant geographically speaking. I've already been flipping through this and really enjoying it so far. The next 2 books are related to one another. One I have read, one I have not. The one I have read before is A Year of Russian Feasts by Catherine Shermatev-Jones. I believe I read this one around this time last year, and I really enjoyed it. It's about a woman with Russian heritage going back to Russia to connect with her cultural roots. She learns a lot of different Russian recipes, a lot of which she has included in this book. I really enjoyed it at the time, but I knew it would be something that I would want to own so as to have those recipes. And then along similar lines, I recently got a few new books from Glagoslav. The only nonfiction book is this one, Adventures in the Slavic Kitchen. This is a book of essays with recipes by Igor Klek. This is one I definitely know I'm going to enjoy. I have been absolutely loving the food-related books that I've been reading lately, so I will probably be picking this one up sooner rather than later. The next 2 books were part of a book outlet order that I placed recently, the first being The King of Vodka: The Story of Pyotr Smirnov and the Upheaval of an Empire by Linda Himmelstein. I feel like this title is pretty self-explanatory, but this is the story of Pyotr Smirnov, his family, and the business and politics of making vodka in Russia. When I was paging through this book when it first arrived, I was noticing that some well-known Russian literary figures are among the list of cast of characters of this book. It seems that some of them approved of the vodka industry and some of them vehemently disapproved. I have had my eye on this book for a while. I'm really excited to add it to my Russia collection. The next one I picked up was actually a recommendation from Michael from Knowledge Lost, and that is The Zhivago Affair, The Kremlin, the CIA, and the Battle Over a Forbidden Book by Peter Finn and Petra Couvet. I am planning on reading Dr. Zhivago later this year. I thought this would be a great one to read at the same time due to the fact that this is a book all about the political controversy over how Dr. Zhivago was first published. The United States government published Dr. Zhivago against the wishes of the Soviet Union, who had forbidden the book to be published. The United States not only published it, but then smuggled it into the Soviet Union and distributed it among the people. I am not only really interested in the book Dr. Zhivago, but I find it fascinating that just the mere publication of the book was a play in soft power politics. I will be super excited to pick this one up alongside of Dr. Zhivago later this year. And lastly, I will show you the stack of books that Steve Donahue has been sending me lately. There are a lot of books on Russia coming out this year since it will be the 100th anniversary of the Russian Revolution later this year. So of course, most of these have to do with the revolution, the first being Russia in Revolution, An Empire in Crisis, 1890 to 1928 by S.A. Smith. Given the long time frame that this book covers, I know it will also cover the failed revolution of 1905, as well as the Russian Civil War that followed the Revolution of 1917. I am never opposed to having more books on the Russian Revolution on my shelves. The next book Steve sent me is this fucking huge tome, The House of Government by Yuri Slezkin. When I first saw this, I thought this book was a novel, and I think it is intended to give that impression because right after the copyright page, it says, "This is a work of history. Any resemblance to fictional characters, dead or alive, is entirely coincidental." This is an absolute door stopper. I am so intimidated by this book. However, if I do go through with my plans to dedicate the entire month of October to reading books on the Russian Revolution, it might not be too far-fetched that I would get around to this. The last book that Steve sent me dealing with the Russian Revolution is probably the one I was most hoping he would eventually send me, and that is Caught in the Revolution by Helen Rappaport. I'm actually hoping to host a read-along in October that deals with the Russian Revolution, since I will be reading so much on the Russian Revolution, and I think this is the book that I would like for us to all read for the read-along. Let me know if you like that idea. This is the story of the revolution, but told through the eyes of the citizenry of St. Petersburg. Helen Rappaport wrote the extremely approachable, extremely engaging The Romanov Sisters, which I read back in 2015. I have been super excited for this book ever since I first heard about it. I really hope this does become the read-along pick. The last 4 books I have to show you deal with Russia, but not necessarily deal with the Russian Revolution. The first is Russia, The Story of War by Gregory Carlton. If you watch Steve's mail hauls, you probably have seen some of these. This is probably pretty meta for you. When I saw Steve open this book in a mail haul and then heard him read the synopsis of this book, I knew that A, he was going to be sending it to me at some point, and B, that it was definitely going to piss me off. The reason why I knew that is because of this first sentence. No nation is a stranger to war, but for Russians, war is a central part of who they are. I disagree with that statement so much, it honestly makes me want to hate read this book and pick apart the argument, which I may end up doing. The next book that Steve sent me is Moscow, 1956, The Silenced Spring by Kathleen E. Smith. This book talks about the period immediately following Khrushchev's so-called secret speech, where he denounced the cult of Stalin and the crimes of Stalin. This was an unprecedented event in Soviet history and definitely opened the floodgates for the Soviet people to start expecting and demanding more freedoms and more transparency from government. As anyone who has studied revolutions know, once those floodgates are opened, it is very difficult and often brutal to get them closed again once people start to get a hint of a thaw and start to develop hope. Another book that I was really hoping Steve would end up sending me, that he did because he's amazing, is Stalin and the Scientists, A History of Triumph and Tragedy, 1905 to 1953 by Simon Ings. Being a scientist in the Soviet Union was an extremely interesting position to be in. It was a much lauded position, but could also be extremely dangerous, especially if your findings went against the dominant Soviet narrative. One day you could be a hero, and the next you could be an enemy of the people. This book does tell the story of several Soviet scientists good ones and bad ones alike, and their experiences. And the very last book in this haul is Bears in the Streets: 3 Journeys Across a Changing Russia by Lisa Dickey. This is a memoir about Lisa Dickey's experiences traveling across Russia in 1995, 2005, and then finally in 2015. Knowing what I know about Russia, I am sure that she experienced an entirely different Russia each time she traveled there. Of course, I think this one is going to be fascinating. So those were all of the nonfiction books that I have acquired recently. Keep an eye out for part 2, which I will be posting soon, which will contain all of the fiction books that I've acquired. If you've read any of these books, heard about any of these books, or want to read them now that you've heard about them here, I would love to hear from you down in the comment section below, or you can reach me a variety of places on social media, and the links to all of my profiles are in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.